Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. This is David Bianco. Today I'm going to be taking a vinyl shootout for the Doobie Brothers' 8th album. And it's a good one called Minute by Minute. We're going to look at 3 different pressings of it. That's coming up next on the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. Well, what can you say about the Doobie Brothers? They were a band that lasted many years, had, as I said, a few incarnations of their band lineup and different sounds. This was one in what I would call Doobie Brothers 2.0 when Michael McDonald came in, and he made a big influence writing-wise, vocally, and kind of the way they sounded overall, moving from a really hard rockish kind of sound to a little more mellow and jazzy kind of style, a little more soulful vocals. But it really got them through and really extended the life of the band, in my opinion. But this album was their 8th release, came out December 1st, 1978. And this was, in fact, the last album that Jeff Skunk Baxter was a part of. This particular album spent 87 weeks on the Hot 100 Billboard, and it spent 5 weeks non-consecutively at number 1, was certified 3 times platinum. Now, the single off of here that was big was What a Fool Believes, and it hit number 1 on the Billboard 100 in April of 1979, and in fact, was the best-selling, biggest hit for the Doobie Brothers. They also were rewarded at the Grammy Awards, the 22nd to be exact, and they received for that the Best Vocal Performance by a Duo or Group, and the single What a Fool Believes received Song of the Year and Record of the Year. So they took it all. So quite an influential album, actually. What I compared these on is 3 versions. I've got the original US OG or original first pressing, which was done, pressed at a plant called Gold Disc Recording Products. And this was a plant that was in Long Island in Hallbrook, New York. And it formerly was called Sonic Recording Products. And this plant was around until 1983. I've got 7 records in my collection from this particular pressing plant, but it's not one of the ones you hear of a lot, actually. And so this is a really clean copy of this. What I compared it to was my Nautilus Super Disc, which is a half-speed master. It's got transparent vinyl on this. I've had this for a long time, since probably early 80s, I think these came out. This is a great sounding one and also has very quiet vinyl. I'll get into more specifics. And then finally, the Speaker's Corner, which I just acquired. This one was one I was looking for, and it happened that Acoustic Sounds website had it, and it had it at the old retail price of $35, where in fact a lot of the newer Speaker's Corner in the last year and a half have jumped to $42 to $45. So this was a good deal. It's still there. Check it out. They probably had some older inventory, and that's why the pricing is the way it is. But I wanted to have this to compare it because I've also got one of these of the Captain and Me that I'll be doing a shootout against as well soon. So that was where I was headed with this. So these albums gave pretty distinct signatures, and I guess that's good in a way, because one can then look back and say, okay, so which sound do I like the best? So they had very distinct sounds. So let me start with the Speaker's Corner. The Speaker's Corner sound was what I would call very full. It had a very full sound, broad sound stage, and was probably maybe half a dB. I think it came up to be about a half a dB louder than the other 2. So I had to make a little adjustment for that. but it was definitely the one that had the strongest bottom end of these others as well. So of the three, this one had the strongest bottom end. But again, some of that was in fact noticeable on early tracks as you started to get toward the center of the disc, and the cut's a little different, obviously. It wasn't quite as profound as it was in the earlier tracks, the first 2 or 3 tracks on each side, I noticed. But it really had a great crisp sound. The vinyl was quiet. I wouldn't call it dead quiet. You could hear a bit of a surface. These are all pressed at Palace in Germany. Speaker's Corner exclusively presses there. So it definitely was a clean sound and didn't have a lot of noticeable noise. But again, it wasn't as quiet as the next one I'm going to bring out, because this one didn't use any special vinyl formulation. So if you like a beefier sound with a good high end, the Speaker's Corner definitely brings it to the table. The Nautilus, or the half-speed master, is on virgin vinyl, on translucent, transparent vinyl. Very quiet surface, and a very great overall balance. In other words, the bottom was present, but not as heavy as the Speaker's Corner. The top end was pleasingly crisp, but not overly crisp. And the mid-range vocals were very strong. So for me, this is probably the most pleasing one, because it really kind of meets everything in the middle and has a very quiet surface vinyl as well, which is always important to me as a listener. So this one really did well. The OG, or the original, on Warner Brothers here in the US, was, in comparison, very clean. Not noise-free, of course, it's just regular vinyl. But it was a little brighter than I like, to the point where there were even some spots of sibilance where there were S's especially. So this one was a little bit on the brighter side. And it had good imaging, in the sense that the instruments were very easily to be placed and very well to be heard, but it just didn't have a lot of beef to it compared to the other two. Again, the Speaker's Corner having a bit of a more extreme bottom end, or a little bit more boost to it, but this one had more, I would say, more clarity, but the clarity came at the expense of a brighter sound. And again, some areas where there was just minor sibilance. So clean, yes. Very rewarding in being able to identify instrumentation. Yes, as a matter of fact, you'd kind of not hear it maybe on the others, and then you'd listen to this and hear it, and then you could then recall and see that it was on the other when you were going back and forth. Because I A/B these two with a switch, where I just go back and forth on these, so they're playing neck to neck with each other. Which brings me to another point I want to make. And that is that one thing you'll notice when you're doing this side by side is the degree to which these are actually going at the same speed. Now, my turntables are set to be exactly the same speed-wise, but this copy, the Speaker's Corner, played a bit slower. So I had to increase the speed slightly on this one to about 34, almost 34 RPM to get it to dead match and stay in sync with the other two. I'm not sure why that happened or what caused it. Obviously, it was cut that way. I tried it on both turntables going back and forth with the same result. So relative to the OG and the Nautilus, which those two were dead together, they never really drifted from one another. This one was a tad slower. So that's another interesting byproduct of doing this side-to-side comparison. You can get that right in a second when you're switching. If the one's taken off on you, or conversely, if the other one's slowing down on you, whatever the reality of the matter is, then, you know, it becomes a little more obvious as you go through the song and they start to separate from one another, so to speak. So for me, the Nautilus definitely is the one that I will say is my go-to. It's always great to have the OG, and if you like things a little on the brighter side, that one's going to get you there. On the speaker's corner, if you really like maybe a little more oomph on the bottom, then you're going to get a little bit more of that with this. But again, that speed deviation is just... Again, you probably wouldn't notice it, but even I played it against the song playing through Spotify and saw that just listening to it, it sounded a little slower. So if you know the songs well, it might be bothersome to you. So those are all things to consider. So for me, the Nautilus is going to remain my go-to version. It has been ever since I got it, so that hasn't changed. The speaker's corner was interesting in terms of a little bit of the depth that you got from it. But boy, that speed issue just really caught me by surprise. And it really did infect me really thinking that that was one that I would turn to very often. The OG being a little bright, that stays with me. And I don't think I'm going to be able to handle that on a regular basis. If you like what you've seen and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider clicking on the bell below and picking the all option for notifications. A thumbs up or like is also appreciated for this video, as well as any comments you might like to leave. Again, I'll be releasing another shootout for the Doobie Brothers on The Captain and Me coming up in the next few days. So for now, again, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time on our Safe and Sound Texas audio excursion. Take care, everybody.